Heb ik wel? Is the album going to be called Mountains of the Moon, or is it just...
No, it has no title.
So how come there was a title once?
That was just like a kind of studio working title, a provisional thing. That's what that was.
Somewhere, I think, in December, so maybe November, in Q magazine, there was this.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe everything you read. I think it's a mistake too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you first started out with Talk,
sure,
it wasn't actually meant as a group thing. You started out just doing a demo session with the two others.
Yeah, that's true, absolutely, and just got on well with them, had a good rapport with them. Yeah, absolutely.
And but so now you're solo. So it's
yeah, I mean, I'm solo in a way. I just kind of think, you know, across those albums like Spirit of Eden and Laughing Stock, the kind of thing that Talk was it wasn't kind of like a band in a conventional sense. It was very much more like a kind of collective of musicians that work together. So rather than it being kind of like, you know, me and Tim writing and then like you know, Lee there were also, you know, people like Mark Feltham and Martin Ditcham that we, you know, Henry Lowther, stuff like that we kind of worked with over a period and sort of knew, and it's kind of like a coming together at the point when you make the albums, but then in that period in between, so much time that everyone kind of is free to move where they like. So although sort of you know, the point at which me finishing writing with Tim, I mean, at that point I kind of think, you know, and Lee off doing his own stuff, I sort of think, well, you can't call an album now a Talk album which doesn't have those elements in. So, you know, that's why it goes under my own name, not through like wanting it to, but through not wanting it to go out under a name that isn't true. The thing of it being like a kind of solo album is, you know, it's still like written with 3 other people and it's still performed like with about 16 other people, so it's more like I'm kind of like a common link to it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, I always believe, much as you write things, all musicians that record on an album, whether a part's written for them or not, it's the musician themselves that you know, it's their personality and a part of them that you want in the performance.
So the process wasn't that much different, or what?
The reason, the way in which the process was different was just because with Spirit of Eden and Laughing Stock, the kind of approach with that was that Tim and I would write in a very skeletal form, let people freeform, take fragments of their freeform playing and then, you know, assemble an arrangement from that, where with this it's just everything is written up front, and that then what you do with people is you ask them to stick to the notation, but give them looseness in interpretation.
So the Laughing Stock and Spirit of Eden, was it they played and then you edited, or did you rearrange?
You just kind of like, you know, give someone like, say, you know, the amount of times incidental. So like you give someone 10 hours of playing, it's kind of like, you know, you then listen back to that and just take small sections of things that they've played and either use them where they exist, or else you move them to other places on the album and create an arrangement from that. It was just it was just like taking the idea that when you improvise and you play something for the first time, you kind of play it at its peak. And if you kind of like play something and then you think, oh, I like that, and then you replay it, you never quite get it. It's like the thing of demoing. You know, if you demo a track, no matter how badly you try to demo it, there will always be a quality within it that you subsequently would try to recreate, which you shouldn't do. So it was really like that as a basic approach. But by the time we'd done Laughingstock, it's kind of like, okay, well look, we've explored that approach. You know, I'd worked writing with Tim for like maybe 10 years at that point, and it's kind of like, you know, it's important from album to album that you develop. And we just kind of felt, you know, we've reached what is very much like a natural end point. Let's not force it, let's not lose experimentation and become formula. So that's
But is it also easier for you to write now?
No, the writing just gets harder all the time. I mean, the thing of recording is easy because all you're looking to do with record is to get musicians that you have, like, you know, an affinity with, and just get them to be really relaxed and kind of understand mentally the approach that you want the music to have. So that's like, that side of things is much easier with this way of writing up front of the album. But the process of writing and arranging does not get easier, it gets harder because you're just continually trying not to cover ground that you've previously used.
Okay, just like to go back and
Sure.
work through the years.
Sure,
if you
yeah.
want. Because I've been reading some old interviews from like 81,
Right, must have
82.
been nice for you.
It was nice, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you seem like you talk a lot about this, about writing music and creating, and that being very important. And there's also this, when you choose Elvis Costello to support.
Right.
And it seems like you were sort of like a lot clever than most step-you bands. So I was just wondering, did you already then sort of know which way you were heading?
No, absolutely not. That's an impossible one. I don't actually think that far ahead. You know, all I do is just sort of think, well, look, you know, I don't want to redo what I've already done. I think, you know, where you go through those early albums, one of the things that made a difference was sort of having a second album that was quite a successful one. It meant that at the point when we went into a studio, we had much more money available to us in terms of getting real people in to play stuff, and also in the amount of time that we had to spend in the studio. So I think that's important. The other thing is it's kind of like, you know, where we'd begun and we were in sort of a format which was a very simplistic song form and quite short and direct. All you're then looking to do is just to try and stretch that form and look at different ways of bastardising it to get you into new areas. You know, and you can kind of say, you know, it's like the thing of like moving into an album, like it's sort of like, you know, with all these things from album to album, you just sort of think, okay, look, what is the reason that I'm making this album? What is it on this album that I want to do that I haven't done before? Now, where you kind of move up to Spirit of Eden, I kind of think that was very much like, in a way, where all those earlier albums were trying to get to. And then having got there, I then think the important thing is that, you know, you either just stop making records at that point because you've kind of reached what you were trying to get, or from that point you'd seriously redress, you know, these other areas that you go for.
But is it only that, or is it also like a sort of a struggle to the business in a way? Because today it seems like a really like a decision to do. Well, you had this Colour of Spring, which was hugely successful.
Sure.
And then you sort of did the most uncommercial thing. Was that like a big decision? Or?
No, because it's not, the commerciality isn't a decision at all. It doesn't come into it. It's kind of like at the point when we were, you know, looking to towards Spirit of Eden, that was just like a thing of just sort of saying, obviously at that point in time you still had, an album format, so your album was very much two sides, and that was just the two important elements, to making that album was just sort of saying, okay, the first one is to write music that lasts the whole of one side, and the other was just to look at this new way of arranging where we work with the arranged improvisation. So that was it. And I just sort of think, what you want to do is just try and make music that you can't hear anywhere else. You want to just try and be as unique as you can and as diverse as you can, and just see if there are ways of kind of like mixing different areas of music and getting them to cross with each other in a way which isn't, obvious. So,
but that's still sort of like an external decision, if you know what I mean. That's still looking at the other things that's around, and not just go the next step. Or it's also like a decision not to be like anyone else, not to be commercial.
Well, it's not a decision not to be commercial, because that's not a decision. I just think it was in the nature of the material that we wrote, in like It's My Life and Colour of Spring, that they were commercial albums, but it's not like, it's not like a decision to do that, because it's kind of like, why you get into music in the beginning is because you like music. I mean, that's the reason. When you're doing all that stuff in like the early years, and you just sort of like, doing concerts and things and whatever, and a lot of the time it's costing you money to actually get up there and play them, and the reason you're doing it is for the love of music. It's not to like try and get some kind of commerciality. So it's like, you then, I just don't think you should lose touch with that. I think, you should just try and keep that as what it's all about.
So did it feel good to make Spirit of Eden?
Yeah, well, that was very much, for me, that was kind of like, that was kind of like the ambition in a way. Although I couldn't say, at the point we did the first album, I thought at some point we'll make that album. It's at the point when we made it, it was kind of like, okay, with this album, this is what we've been trying to get to, because we've got all the musicians on here we want, everything is real, we're using this idea of like free playing and this thing of like being really loose in a studio, so that when you go in to a recording studio, you're not concerned about whether you stop for 10 minutes because of the cost, or you're not bothered about if you get someone in, the amount of money it's cost and then you can't use it. All of that goes. It's just about getting the right feeling from the people that you play with and making them at their ease, and just kind of just getting everyone mentally where they should be. But you don't have that, you see, early on. When you first do record deals, you've got too much biting on you to be able to do that.
Yeah, but you had to use synthesizers and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So, from Spirit of Eden to Laughing Stock, what was like the new area?
The new thing between those for me was it was the what you could do. You could have that you could have say like you had 5 people playing on the one track. That those 5 people could all be working in different time signatures, that they would all be kind of looping in different places, and at certain places these loops would kind of like duck into each other and then they would move out of each other. and with the actual construction of the songs, again, we should just try and cover some different ground. So it was kind of like, you know, you take like the first track on that album, Merman, and it was kind of like, okay, let's write a track here where no part of it ever gets repeated. You know, it's just totally a movement like this rather than any recognisable song form. And then you move into like Ascension Day, and it would be like, okay, on this one, across these 3 verses, verse 1 will be a 10-bar verse, verse 2 will be a 9-bar verse, verse 3 will be an 8-bar. But what you do as this thing's shortening up on you, vocally you've still got to hold it, but what you do is you turn the on-beat onto the off-beat, and you have one person understanding the downbeat as being in this place in the bar, and the person playing next to him not even realising that's the downbeat at all, but seeing it as the upbeat. So that was the main premise to that album, and again we continued with this, you know, free improvised form to it. Having done that was kind of like, I'd find it very hard to know where you then continue that. And and it's sort of like, you know, Tim would feel the same on that. So it's kind of like, the thing with this new album was it was kind of like, okay, let's still sort of look at using, say, like 15 or 20 instruments, whatever they are, across the width of the album in terms of the amount of colour that those instruments will give you. But at any one point, you never have more than 4 or 5 instruments playing, and you shouldn't be afraid for that to come down to one instrument. So that the impression that you get across the album is of a very small unit all the time, although that isn't the actual reality of it. And that what you do, you choose the instruments that play on this album, ones that can exist in different areas of music, so that you can look at a classical area and a jazz area and a folk area, and you can say, okay, well look, you know, you look at, say, like a piano, and that can exist across all 3. You take a clarinet, and that can exist in a classical and a jazz sense. You take the flute, that can exist in the classical and the folk sense. And you just kind of put it together like that. Then you look at like the woodwind section, and you say, okay, well within this group, we want a balance within this, that the first clarinet player should principally have a jazz background to him, but the oboist should come from a classical one, so that they're sitting at odds. So there's this kind of shift between them, that you don't get this kind of classical way of listening to the way the beat feels on its own, but you don't equally just let it all fall with a jazz thing. You work in and out of these areas all the time. But also with it being an acoustic album, you know, there are 2 reasons to that. One is that the ideal is that the album won't be recognisable as having come from any time, having been recorded in any particular year. And the fact that you're working with acoustics means you can't date. And to record in a way that is as realist as this, I think, means, you know, you can't date. But then also to hit these instruments at such a low level that the kind of, you know, the fragile nature of them and the reality of them becomes as important as the note itself. So that the kind of way in which the instrument resonates, or the way in which on a piano the kind of overtones sound, become almost as important as the written note. So I think that's kind of... And sorry, and the one other thing is just with this thing of recording just on these 2 front mics with everything in a real geographical location, and bringing this thing of sound down to such a low level, is that you begin with just the sound of the microphones in an empty room, so that the sound So that it's like the empty room is where you begin with. That's when you first start listening to this album, the first thing you do is locate yourself into a room. And then when you're in that room, then the musicians begin to play. So that's kind of it.
There were actually just 2 microphones in the room.
Yeah, just one, 2 in one location, just to give you stereo. Otherwise, you might as well think of it as one microphone. If you think of it as one stereo microphone, and then everything just exists in its location, and the microphone never moves.
On all the tracks?
Yeah, absolutely, across everything, and then everything, all your musicians are just located in a place where they won't dominate. It's where the engineer's role, Phil Brown, is of total importance to the way this thing works, because you need quite an ear to understand where people must locate in order for that to work.
So instead of mixing, you should have actually physically moved people around.
Yeah, well, once everyone's got their locations, then they stay there. Once they're located, they then don't move.
You must have been pretty close.
Yeah, on the microphone myself for singing. Yeah, maybe this far off.
A track like Westward Bound?
Yeah, sure.
Really, really close.
Well, I don't change my position for that.
No?
But it's just, you just have nothing competing with me at that point, really. You only have those 2 acoustics. But yeah, that is very low-level vocal. I mean, the thing is, because by recording things at a different time, recording people separately, but then maintaining their location, you've still got control over balance. So at the point when I do the vocal on Westward Bound, I'm doing it alone. And then you can still, if it's too quiet, you can bring it up in the mix. So you kind of like create the impression that everything is live, but in reality it isn't. Do you sort of see?
It's funny when you say this, that there are only like 4 instruments at a time, because my first sort of thing about the new album was it's a bit more intimate than, say, Laughing Stock. Not as huge maybe, but intimate in a way. Yeah. But another sort of remarkable thing about your music is that when you talk about the instruments going this and this, it's like you could say the same thing about your vocals, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
There's not these choruses and stuff that much.
Sorry, not.
There's not like a chorus in each song, and
no.
So how do you work with this?
The thing with the vocal is just like you're saying, treat it like an instrument. It's not there to dominate. It's just there to sit in the kind of landscape along with everything else, and it's kind of like start from a melodic point of view, then think about the kind of inflections that it should have sound-wise. In the same way, like if you're looking at a clarinet, at certain notes there might be a certain kind of way you want to hear that note, sound. So when you write the lyric, you have that as an actual, block that you must write to. You must write this lyric phonetically in order for it to sing with a certain way. And then you must write the lyric in a way that when you sing it, you're going to have belief in it.
Did you find words that can make this sound? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do. I just work from that standpoint. I mean, there are a lot of words available to you that can make particular sounds. It's not, but it makes things harder. But it's the way to achieve the result.
So how important is lyrics then to you?
Yeah, very, very important. Because as from a singing point of view, in order to get the performance, you need to believe in what you're singing. And in order to do that, you've got to write about something that has some kind of, inner power to you.
Does it mean anything to you that me, as a listener, doesn't really understand?
No, because I I sort of think, you know, it's like that thing where I've sort of written you down the poems of Stéphane Mallarmé. I mean, they're like French poems, and it's like, for me, when I first heard that piece of music, I just loved the music for what the music was. The fact that I couldn't understand the language was absolutely a secondary consideration. But then finding the translation, it's sort of, well, that's like a kind of bonus. But it's sort of, it's of total importance in the performance. But it's kind of like a slightly secondary in terms of the listening thing.
Well, it never bothered me. Okay, just changing the tape.
Yeah, sure.
It never bothered me either, because it's just, I hear, here she comes, or something. And then it's just, that's sort of a mood for me, and it doesn't really matter what the next is.
Yeah,
So,
but
you
I
get
think
fragments.
I think it's quite nice to be in a thing where you can just kind of like, just get an understanding of, you know,
Yeah.
I don't think it's essential, but I kind of think it's sort of nice to, so that, you know, you can maybe get an idea of the relationship of why at particular points the vocal hits in a certain way because of what it is that it's trying to put across.
Actually, visually, in when you write the lyrics, you write them yourself, do you?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
It's the same thing, 'cause some words are like, what?
Yeah, and
others-
I'm gonna print them on this one.
You are?
Yeah, I'm going to type them out for this one.
How come?
So that there are no mistakes, because you know, there are. I've come across, you know, too many examples of things that I've kind of written where when they've been typed up, the word's been mistaken, and it's completely changed the meaning of the line. You know, so I just want to avoid that problem.
So on the new album, there will be lyric sheet, which is
that's
readable.
Right. Yeah.
So it do matter too that someone sort of can see what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I think it's not. I think it's a bonus. I don't think it's essential, but I think, you know, it's kind of like, you know, nice to have it there if you want it. I don't think you need to read them. I wouldn't in any way insist you should, you know.
When you talk about the room that you played in,
Yeah.
it sounds like that room is very important to the recording.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, and the silence.
Yeah, I think the room is the room and the silence is totally important, because that's what you're doing. You're just existing in a room, and then it's like you're trying to break into the silence. Yeah, absolutely, and then move out of it again.
Because we're actually trying to make this interview in a place which is more quiet than this.
Right.
Maybe in an old theatre, you know, a place like that.
Yeah.
Because silence is a funny thing.
Yeah.
And it's not only sort of in between the tracks. There's this silence.
Yes.
But there's also silence in the songs.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you sort of, is silence an extra instrument, or how do you
Yeah,
use
yeah.
sound?
I just think it's I just kind of think, you know, before you play two notes, learn how to play one note, you know, and it's as simple as that, really. And don't play one note unless you've got a reason to play it, and that's it, really. I like silence. I get on great with silence, you know. I don't have a problem with it. It's just silent, you know. So it's kind of like, well, if you're gonna break into it, just try and have a reason for doing it.
But I mean, in the arrangement, in the songs, sometimes it's like gaps.
Sure.
I was listening, I have it on tape, and I was sort of, you know, music searching on the stereo.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
go,
that must be good. Yeah, that's good, that is. Yeah, yeah. It will sound better on CD than on tape,
yeah.
because you'll be more aware of the way the room exists, which I don't think you can be on cassette.
But the silence gives it sort of like a
sometimes you notice the silence more than you notice music.
Yeah.
It's very difficult just to sit and listen to the new album, writing sort of the letters to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, you know, ideally the way to listen to it is alone, extremely quietly. I don't think you should ever push the volume level beyond the natural volume that the instruments would have been in the room, and then you should, yeah, focus into it. And I kind of think of it in a way as being, you know, almost like you know, like a thing where you meditate and that you just gotta you know, locate.
Do you meditate?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
But okay.
Sorry again.
Did you come last night?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And you just.
I didn't get here till late, maybe about 10, something like that. So I just in the bar. I haven't sort of been anywhere, seen anything, done anything.
So you're promoting the album, traveling around.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a bit more about the silence.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it's very sort of deliberately that you, in songs, put like a gap of a few seconds and then move on, sort of as if to say, you know, there's time enough. Or
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you explain this?
I guess that's just kind of like, you know, to give you time to come out of one thing before you move into the next thing. You know, there's no rush about anything. It's like the same things when at the point when the album ends, maybe there's like, I don't know, a minute or 2 minutes or whatever, and you're still with the room before it stops. You know, it's just. It's kind of like, I just sort of think, you know, if you sort of are in there somewhere, you don't want an abrupt end to things. You just got to like come out of it gradually. So that's all it is. And I think in the same way that applies at the front and the back of the album, I think it applies the same anywhere within it.
Something else. When you sort of first, actually in the beginning, when there were people sort of thinking of you as the other Duran Duran.
Right, sure.
I was talking about you being a bit more clever and stuff.
Right. I don't think we were that clever when we stuck white suits on, but there you go. Yeah.
But there weren't very much of this. I mean,
No.
there was a bit Lee Harris, I see a bit of makeup, and that's sort of it, and then maybe white suits.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I just have to put those things down to kind of like the pressure you come under when you sign a record deal. It's kind of like, you know, you just get hit with all sorts of things at a point when you do a deal. And obviously with anyone, you spend so long trying to get a deal, and it's such an amazing event to get one, you know, that you can now just earn a living by music. You become quite vulnerable in certain areas, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, if you're lucky enough, you can escape that.
But how did you escape that? There must have been some kind of pressure.
I think how we first kind of got to escape it mainly was with the It's My Life album being a kind of successful album, and it was one that there'd been very little kind of it was kind of like in England, it was sort of like, I mean, nothing happened with it in England, and it was kind of like the record company in England, it's sort of like, well, whatever. And then because like elsewhere that became a very successful album, it kind of felt to me like it was then, well, because they'd kind of been left, you know, we'd been left to get on with it, and we'd had a successful album, well then we'd be allowed to do that again. You know, and I think that's kind of where it started from, getting that freedom. And then obviously, like with anything, is the more freedom you get, the less prepared you are to give it up.
And Spirit of Eden sounds like a record that you really had freedom.
Yeah, total, absolute. That was the first album where it is absolute freedom with no dialogue at all. Just, you know, when it's finished and made, it's handed over, and that is the end of the story. And then Laughing Stock was the same, and this one is the same.
And then with this, once you're really talking about playing live was a very important thing, but then you stopped that as well.
Yeah.
Around this period.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped playing live for a few reasons. I stopped playing live, firstly because I wanted to have a family, and I didn't want to tour and have children, you know, at the same time. And even with our last tour, which was sort of after we'd made Colour of Spring, it was already starting to become harder by the nature of the stuff that was written on that album to actually perform that in a live setup. So it was kind of like on that last tour, what was called the Colour of Spring tour in '86, maybe like a third of the set would have been the Colour of Spring, and 2/3 would have actually been the previous album. At the point when you'd move on to something like Spirit of Eden, it'd just be insane to even begin to try and think how you could recreate that. And also because the nature of the recording itself was just totally driven by free-form playing, the minute you would then get people in to duplicate those parts would be the total opposite of the whole purpose of the way in which that album was made.
But this is just one more freedom sort of aspect, isn't it? To be able to not to have to play live.
Yeah, yeah.
And you moved to Suffolk? Or?
Yeah, but the thing as well, you see, by not having to play live, it then puts you in a position where when you come out of making another album, you know, when you come out of making an album, rather than then for that next year being kind of like recreating that, you can just clear your head and start kind of like, you know, thinking where the next one goes. So I think that was another important point before, you know, going into the Spirit of Eden was oh no, that wouldn't be true with that, because we did it on the back of that. No, so I'm wrong there you go. Can't always be right.
But
yeah.
For you being so very important not to repeating yourself,
yeah.
Then you do interviews, and you must be repeating yourself a lot.
Yeah, and that's the worst thing about interviews, is because it's like with anything, at the point you first get asked a question and you answer it because it's what you think, and then, yeah, it becomes formulaic. The answers do become that, yeah, definitely.
But you seem a bit more comfortable than I thought you would be.
Right.
So
maybe it's the chair.
Also in an old interview from '82, actually, you said you thought at the moment Echo and the Bunnymen and U2 were the two bands sort of you thought were most interesting and had the force, actually. And when you look at those today...
Yeah, that's if I did say that, of course.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
right.
At the time they were good,
yeah,
I think.
sure, yeah, sure.
But sort of at one point they must have travelled one way and you must have travelled another. Do you know?
Sure, yeah, I'm sure. Well, obviously, yeah.
And which way do you think they went?
I don't know. I mean, what way did they go? I don't know. What way did they go?
Well, you know, U2 is sort of like one of the biggest bands in the world.
Yeah, for sure they are.
Do you think you could have been?
No, I wouldn't have wanted to have been either. And you know, part of one of the reasons, you know, why they've become so big is because of the amount of live work they've done, because that is an important part of success is live performance. And I mean, you know, they are masters of it, aren't they?
Trains.
Quick, record it.
And they repeat themselves too, so their fans are happy. That's sort of like another success formula, isn't it?
I mean, look, you know, you tell me.
Okay. Well, I think so. Just gotta look at this paper again. Yeah. So, when you wrote me these things, this is the sort of stuff that you sort of listen to mostly, isn't it?
Yeah, sure it is, yeah.
Because I wanted to ask you, because our TV program sort of mainly deals with contemporary music.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's anything wrong with that?
What, contemporary rock music, do you mean? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, pop music, rock
Yeah,
music.
well, I don't know what it is, so how can I say there's anything wrong with it? I think it would be great if you know, music journals and music programs could be as diverse as possible. I think, you know, in the yeah, I mean, I just think it would be nice to sort of say, well, look, you know, if you like this, why don't you try this? You know, and sort of not be afraid to like look back to other eras as well. You know, I mean, maybe with some TV programs there's a problem on the music they play because the way it's recorded isn't, you know, on the case enough, but, you know, they can be some of the best recordings you'll ever hear.
But it seems to me that you're not sort of into anything that's going on sort of in rock pop right now.
No, I'm sort of like really into music. I love music, and you know, I'm not kind of like trying to get away from anything or say, you know, look, I don't have any problem with what's going on now because I don't know what it is, and it doesn't matter, you know. There are just like areas of music that really interest me at the minute, and all I'm trying to do is kind of like find stuff that does that for me, you know, and it's kind of like there's such an insane amount of material out there to get through. It just takes all my time trying to like follow these little paths through, you know, like, you know, artists and then associated artists to them, you know.
So, but you've been away for like 7 years
Mm-hmm.
from the music business.
Well, yeah, but I've been away from the music business for much longer than that. I've been away from the music business for like 12 years. You know, I mean, I think at the, you know, at the point when we began, at the point when we finished touring in '86, at that point, I think I've been away from the music business. Because at that point, it's kind of like you just work to absolutely what you believe, and then when the thing's ready, you deliver it. You know, and although I sort of have lots of friends that are musicians, you know, we don't kind of like operate in some kind of like, you know, we just, you know.
So, and what did you leave behind then? What was the life? Was it just touring, or was it? What is the music business?
What is it? Yeah, I mean, you know what the music business is. I mean, you know.
This is interviews and. So would you appear on a TV show with like Top of the Pops or something?
Would I appear on Top of the Pops? Well, that's a pretty unlikely question, really. You know.
That's not something you sort of. You haven't decided about it.
Well, I don't really think it's like, you know, a real consideration. I mean,
No.
you know.
But have you decided not to do music videos anymore?
Well, I'd sort of, again, it's not like a decision. I can't see there's anything on this album you would make a video for. You know, I can see there's things on this album. The one thing that I did wonder about doing for this album was to get together with, you know, somebody and make a film for this album. And that would interest me. But I don't think it would be much more a film along the kind of lines of, you know, if you were sitting in a room and you would sort of like just looking at an open fire and you just have like this area of movement and no narrative, and it's just that. And it kind of gives you like something that you kind of like look towards, but you don't have to think about and you don't have to consider. But, you know, it's just like a kind of visual focus. You know, I could consider that. But, you know, I mean, I'd
Actually, we want to play your music from the new album, and then we sort of just considered just, you know, shooting something that we thought was nice.
Yeah.
So, do you have any suggestions? You know, there's a fire, and
yeah, I mean, I quite like things, you know, like I like water as a form of movement. I think water's got great shape and motion too. I like that kind of thing where you kind of like looking down a stream, and you get little objects that kind of move slowly and then maybe get caught round something for a while and then they sort of move on. Things like that I think are nice.
there are also like things from the air. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
going.
Absolutely. I mean, I think movement's always a good thing. I mean, I like bird movement. I like, you know, I just like, you know, again, things with motion, but things of motion that kind of, you know, relate to the sort of, you know, the flow of the tracks.
The clouds, maybe.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah.
So you like visuals. You're not sort of leaving that out of your life.
Yeah, I like visual things. Yeah, I mean, I've just finished writing a piece of piano music for like a kind of art installation thing. So there you have sort of an example where I'm kind of, you know, but I'd sort of, you know, I like the idea of trying to get music into other areas that I haven't sort of worked in before. You know, and certainly, you know, where you look at things like film, you know, but in a classical, you know, in a classical sense, I mean in a, you know, I don't mean in a sense of classical music, but I mean in a classical sense of filmmaking, where it's not driven by music, but the music is really there to kind of underscore mood. I would very much like to work in that area. I think that'd be great.
But you since Laughing Stock, it's been like 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a bit of this. You've been writing music, and
Sure.
so what have you done?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a bit of time just kind of writing like stuff for woodwind. Spent a bit of time at home learning how to play the piano. You know, I spent a bit of time just kind of like experimenting with different sounds and the way things might resonate.
But how could you afford not to do anything? Sort of.
Well, you see, from at this point in time, I can still afford to live on royalties that I've earned in the past. So that's how I can afford to do it.
And so the new album is not just because they needed new money in the bank. Oh.
No, I wouldn't have made it for that reason.
Could you imagine yourself living and not sort of putting anything out?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem, no problem at all. I can't imagine not playing music, but I don't feel any need to perform music, and I don't feel any need to record music. But you know, that's all that is, I mean, when you first take up an instrument in the beginning, that's all that is, isn't it? So why should you want anything different now than you wanted in the beginning? Because it's just your love of what it is and the nature of the instrument that you care about.
So is this why you take things like the new album just being acoustic and just two mics, sort of to have a motivation to try to fulfill sort of an idea? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Since you don't have like a motivation to record the things to get them out,
Yeah.
then you sort of put things up for yourself that to make it sort of like harder for yourself to record. Or
No, that way of recording was really just to get that kind of geography to the sound. That's all that was. Yeah. I don't do things to make my life harder. You know, I find the writing and everything hard enough as it is. You know.
but so, who would you play to? Your family or?
Who would
Or
I
just for
play
yourself?
to? I wouldn't play to anyone. I'd just sit in a room on my own and play. You know, I mean, that's all it's about, isn't it? It's just, I just find, you know, whether you're with a piano or whether you're with a guitar, I just think the physical feel of the instrument, I think, is great. And I kind of think, you know, in the same way, like, you know, where you have those little Chinese balls that you kind of move around. I kind of think, you know, you got the same sort of therapy on a piano or on a guitar, and I just find it a really relaxing thing to do. You know, and like I said, I don't kind of, you know, it's kind of like, I don't kind of feel any need to have to try and write stuff. You know, I'm really quite happy just to play one note and just to hit it at different volume levels and just, you know, see how long it will resonate for before it stops and things like that, you know, and just look at the dynamic shape of this note to the one that gets played afterwards. I just find it really relaxing, and I just really, you know, you know, yeah, I kind of think, you know, maybe like in the same way where people have kind of like mantras and stuff that they get into. Just kind of think of like the piano and the guitar almost like a way of physically and mentally getting into that.
So for the songs for the new album, they didn't just come. You have to decide to make an album now.
Yeah,
because music's always there.
But yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's kind of like at the point where you say, okay, look, I now know what the reasons are for making this album. I now know why I'm going to do it, because on this album I'm going to, you know, work with this room and work with this geography and work in this minimalism, stress the importance of sound, work acoustically, take the levels down so that the resonance becomes as important as the note, you know, just those kind of things.
That's actually what I meant before. So you see him as a project, sort of, and not yourself as a musician or a businessman. Or.
Well, I definitely don't see myself as a businessman. You know, I just think of myself as a musician first and foremost.
In the beginning, in one of those interviews, you said that. Maybe you said that.
Yeah, that's right. Good.
Your biggest sort of dream was that your music would be remembered 20 years from then.
Yeah, sure, I did say that. I remember that one.
So that's sort of now.
Yeah, that's right. It pretty much is. We're getting there.
So is it achieved, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, I mean, I just sort of think that with that statement, I kind of think, You see, I kind of think of the statements slightly differently, that I sort of think, you know, the ideal with music is that it exists outside of a time and that it can exist in any time. So that's what I would... I think at that time, because I was more kind of caught up in a thing of actually writing songs, that's why I would talk in that way, and I would sort of have seen 20 years as like, you know, this kind of arbitrary time, but something where now you see, I don't think in a song format. I just think that, you know, like I say to you, that if it exists totally outside of time, that is, you know, the ultimate thing you could achieve.
So you would rephrase it now to that?
Yeah, I would now, because like I said, I think that's sort of said with regard to songwriting, where I don't think of myself as a songwriter at all. I kind of think of myself, you know, just like more as sort of like a musician, really, with an interest in sound, and being fortunate enough to work with an engineer who not only understands what I mean by that, but can help me achieve it.
So is that sort of like the goal now? Or?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say it's like a goal, because it's not like something that I expect to do. Because the goal is just, you know, you make things for the right reason, and that you're fortunate as a musician that even if you can't do it as an occupation, you can always do it. So the goal is just to enjoy what you do, and that's it.
Now, and that.
Yeah, now, yeah.
So do you set yourself? Okay. The last track on Laughing Stock.
What is the last track?
That's because my name is Rune.